Now, as we've discussed earlier, there's a big controversy over shark protection on Queensland beaches. Also, the ongoing debate about Greta Thunberg's speech, and Labor and the government disagreeing slightly on the future of the Australian relationship with China. These are some of the issues I took up just a few moments before we came on air with One Nation leader, Pauline Hanson. Pauline Hanson, thanks for joining us. I wanted to first get your thoughts on Greta Thunberg and her address to the United Nations.
I wasn't impressed with her address. I think that she's basically a teenager who has had no life experiences. She's actually voicing what other people have put into her head. Now, this has been happening for quite some time, Chris, and I'm hearing it all the time, of what our children are being taught in our school system. It's very biased, it's not a balanced view, and this is why children are faced with, anxiety, panic attacks, and they feel that the world is coming to an end and is doomed. This should be stopped in our educational system, and Greta was a clear example of what is actually happening. And I blame the adults around her for allowing this to happen to our children, and especially in the climate change rally that they had. How much effort would these kids put into it if they had to go on a weekend? Their own time. It was great to take a day off from school. It was hyped up by the media, by everyone, and I think it's disgraceful.
Well, indeed, we've spoken to child psychologists who have talked about the anxiety this is creating for children around the world, particularly in Australia, of course. And Greta Thunberg, of course, is a teenager. Of course, what she's saying is demonstrably untrue and alarmist, yet the ABC in this country portrays it as some impassioned plea. There's a lot of barracking from the media and politicians in this country. Shouldn't they actually be correcting her and putting the facts on the table?
You've got a lot of the media have left-leaning views, Chris, and they're pushing their own agenda as well. And they're not going to interfere in this, especially the ABC. And this is why I said that the ABC should, in their charter, come as fair and balanced, and it never is. The whole debate about climate change is not fair and balanced. And the fact is, people are allowed to push their own agenda. If you say anything against it, you're actually ridiculed, you're condemned, and everyone has a go at you. This is what happens on the floor of Parliament as well. The Greens can come out and say their radical views. No one challenges them. And when they are challenged by Malcolm Roberts, they won't debate him. They don't have the facts. So they push this fear-mongering all the time.
Yeah, it is a nonsense, but the voters get to have a say. The voters get to have a say at election time. I just need to rip through a number of issues I want to get your thoughts on today, Pauline. One of them relates to your home state of Queensland and the way the authorities there have removed drum lines from beaches there that protect and have for decades successfully protected those beaches and the people on them from shark attacks. It seems like the authorities have moved preemptively here. The federal government now saying they needn't have removed those drum lines and they should put them back. Is this a safety issue for Queensland with the school holidays coming up?
Most definitely, it certainly is. We've had shark attacks up at the Whitsundays, and it's very important that we do need the drum lines there to protect swimmers and people who are in the water. Now, we haven't had any shark attacks on the Gold Coast. They've got the drum lines there. Whereas if you go over the border, they actually are having shark attacks there because they don't have the drum lines. It's important for safety. We live in a climate in part of the world where we can enjoy our beaches. Lives haven't been taken because of these drum lines, and I think it's very important that we continue with the drum lines.
Yeah, well, we're talking to a number of people about that issue. It's got a way to go. I just want to talk to you about Australia's relationship with China. It's in the spotlight at the moment, of course, with Scott Morrison talking in the US and saying that China should lose its status as a developing nation when it comes to world trade rules. The Labor Party siding with China on this. The Labor Party suggesting China should keep that developing nation status for now, and also Labor calling for closer defence cooperation with China. What are your thoughts on how this debate is shaping and where it's heading?
Well, look at the Labor Party's interaction with China with the bag of money that's handed to them, or don't get involved in this because don't say anything about it, as Michael Danby was saying in his speech, and he had front Bill Shorten with his speech, and Bill Shorten says, I don't want you to deliver the speech with regards to China. That's going back a few years ago, because they don't want to upset China. Look, China is a developed world as far as I'm concerned. Just have a look at it. It's moved ahead in leaps and bounds. They don't believe that they should come under the climate change, the Paris Agreement. We're actually paying, because they're as a developing nation, the same as India, there's $100 million a year in this fund that is given to China and India. Of course they want the money. We're fools giving them this money, paying into this fund to pay them. They're the ones that are buying up Australia, left, right and centre. They're the ones that are buying all our assets. It's just ridiculous to think that China's still a developing nation.
What about closer defence ties?
And if we don't... No, I don't want any defence ties with China. I don't trust China at all. China is manipulating, moving itself into areas to position itself, like the Belt Road, everything they're doing, buying up ports or assets or putting money into the small islands around in the Pacific because they can have control over it. China is gearing up for the future and they can see themselves as the leaders of this world.
Just finally, Pauline, I want to get your thoughts on what your New South Wales leader, Mark Latham, is proposing, and that is he's going to put in a private member's bill to amend the anti-discrimination laws in New South Wales to protect religious freedom. Presumably, he's declared it would ensure that something like the sacking of Israel Folau for his biblical references could not occur again. Do you support this action? Have you colluded and consulted with Mark Latham on this action, given that the federal government is looking at laws in this area as well?
No, I haven't colluded with Mark Latham at all. I have listened to him speak on these issues, and I don't oppose what he's saying. I think Mark pretty much has his finger on the pulse with a lot of things in New South Wales, and he's speaking out about this.
Why wouldn't you speak directly to Mark Latham? You're the federal leader, he's your state leader. This is an issue that is common between state and federal politics at the moment, the issue of religious freedom. Why wouldn't you be meeting and getting, getting everything lined up on this matter?
I'm catching up with Mark today, and I am meeting with him today, so it will be something that will be discussed then. So I haven't been able to have meetings with him. Chris, my schedule has been absolutely flat out over the last few months. I do touch base with Mark. I touch base with him occasionally, but to speak in depth about this, no, I haven't.
All right,
we'll talk to him today about it.
Yeah, we'll see what comes out. That bill due to go into Parliament next week, I'm told. But we'll find out more, follow up with you and Mark Latham. Thanks so much for joining us, Pauline Hanson.
My pleasure. Thank you.